They took her ID badge, placed a cardboard box in her arms, and ended her career with a single sentence. After 2 decades of saving lives, Nurse Malene Jenkins was dismissed for one reason: she acted when others hesitated. Humiliated and numb, she stepped out of the hospital and into the cold Chicago rain, convinced everything she had built was gone. She was wrong. Because 2 military-grade Black Hawk helicopters weren't just entering the city airspace. They were coming for her. The thunder from the rotors shook the streets, nearly knocking her off balance. And then a voice cut through the chaos, raw, urgent, undeniable. "We don't need the doctor. We need the nurse." This is how a woman went from fired and forgotten to a national hero in less than 60 minutes. The fluorescent lights inside the Human Resources office at St. Jude's Memorial Hospital buzzed relentlessly, like they were designed to wear people down. Malene sat stiffly on a worn grey chair, her hands folded tight in her lap to hide the tremor. These hands had found veins in collapsing patients. They had steadied bleeding hearts and comforted terrified parents. But now, under the cold stare of HR Director Linda Halloway and the smug calm of Dr. Marcus Sterling, they felt powerless. "Insubordination," Linda said flatly, tapping a folder without looking up. "Gross misconduct. Violation of hospital chain of command policies." Malene inhaled the stale, antiseptic air. "I saved the patient," she said quietly. "Leo is alive. If I hadn't given the epinephrine while Dr. Sterling was waiting on insurance approval, that child would be dead." Sterling shifted in his chair, his designer stethoscope resting more like an accessory than a tool. "You crossed a line," he replied smoothly. "You're a nurse. Your role is to follow orders, not override them." "I restored a heartbeat," Malene snapped, her composure finally breaking. He was in anaphylactic shock. "You were on the phone with legal." "That's Eno." "That's enough," Linda interrupted, her voice empty of emotion. "The decision is final. Your access is revoked. Security will escort you out." Silence fell like a weight. Sterling smiled, the kind of smile worn by men who had never been challenged and never forgiven it. The walk to her locker felt like attending her own funeral. 20 years. She had started here at 25, fresh from nursing school. She had survived pandemics, budget cuts, understaffing, and endless overnight shifts. She knew everyone, from surgeons to janitors. Security guard Mr. Henderson avoided her eyes as she packed her locker into a small box. A stethoscope. A photo of her late husband Mark. Painkillers. And a mug that read, "Nurses call the shots." 2 decades reduced to something that barely filled a car seat. "I'm sorry, Malene," Henderson muttered. "It's not your fault, Eddie," she said softly, though her voice shook. As she walked through the trauma ward one last time, the other nurses looked away, not out of indifference, but fear. They knew if they spoke up, they'd be next. The hospital doors slid shut behind her. Outside, the October rain soaked her instantly. Her car was in the shop. She had 6 blocks to walk to the train. Unemployed. Alone. Nowhere to be. Chicago moved on around her, uncaring, taxis splashing water, strangers rushing past. With every step, the box felt heavier. She replayed the moment again and again. The boy. The blue lips. The split-second decision that saved him, and destroyed her career. "Maybe I should have stayed quiet," she whispered to the rain. "Maybe I forgot my place." She reached the bridge over the Chicago River when everything changed. The ground began to vibrate. The vibration beneath the bridge intensified, turning into a deep, rolling roar that echoed through the city. Malene froze mid-step. People stopped. Cars screeched to a halt. Heads tilted skyward. Through the curtain of rain, 2 matte Black Hawk helicopters emerged between the buildings, flying impossibly low. Their rotors churned the air, whipping rain sideways and sending loose paper spiraling across the street. "What the hell is that?" someone shouted. Malene's heart hammered. This wasn't a police drill. This wasn't a news stunt. The helicopters banked sharply and hovered, right over the riverfront plaza ahead of her. Wind slammed into her chest, nearly ripping the cardboard box from her arms. She stumbled back, shielding her face as the noise swallowed everything else. And then the side door of the lead helicopter slid open. A man in full tactical gear leaned out, one knee braced, headset tight against his jaw. His eyes locked onto her like he had already memorized her face. He raised a hand. "Malene Jenkins," his voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "Stand where you are." Her name. The crowd parted instinctively, people backing away from her as if danger had suddenly chosen a single target. I think you've got the wrong person," Malene said, her voice lost in the wind. The helicopter descended another 10 feet. "We don't," the man replied. "You are required immediately." "Required?" Before she could speak again, 2 armored SUVs screeched onto the plaza. Doors flew open. Men and women in military uniforms fanned out, forming a perimeter with calm, rehearsed precision. A captain jogged toward her, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. He said, lowering his voice. "You're not in trouble. But time is critical." "For what?" she asked, clutching the box to her chest. "I just lost my job." "I don't." "There's a patient," he interrupted. "And you're the only one who can keep him alive." Her breath caught. The captain glanced at the cardboard box in her arms. "Permission to take that for you?" She nodded numbly as he passed it to another soldier. "What patient?" she asked. "Where?" He didn't answer. He simply turned and pointed to the helicopter. The message was clear, now or never. Inside the aircraft, the noise dropped to a controlled thunder. Red emergency lights bathed the cabin as the door slammed shut. A medic immediately strapped her into a seat opposite a stretcher. On it lay a man in his early 40s, unconscious, skin ashen, chest rising unevenly under a tangle of wires and tubes. Malene's professional instincts snapped into place. "What happened?" she demanded, already leaning forward. "Massive allergic reaction," the medic replied. "Unknown compound. We've tried everything." Malene scanned the monitors. Oxygen levels unstable. Blood pressure crashing. "He needs epinephrine," she said instantly. "And his airway isn't secure." "We administered the maximum safe dose," the medic said. "It didn't hold." Malene met his eyes. "Then your dosage isn't the problem. Your timing is." She reached for the kit, hands steady now, mind sharp. "Who is he?" she asked. The medic hesitated. Finally, he answered. "He's a 4-star general." The helicopter lifted off, banking hard toward the horizon. And in that moment, Malene Jenkins was no longer an unemployed nurse in the rain. She was back where she belonged. Between life and death. The helicopter touched down at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base with a violent jolt. Before the rotors even slowed, the side doors flew open. Bright floodlights cut through the night as a medical team rushed forward, their movements fast and silent. The stretcher was lifted in one smooth motion and rolled toward a waiting hangar that had been transformed into a temporary surgical unit. "Malene Jenkins," a sharp voice called out. A tall Air Force colonel stepped into her path, uniform crisp despite the chaos. "You're in charge," he said without hesitation. "Every specialist here answers to you." Malene barely registered the words. Her focus was locked on the patient. "Get me suction," she said, walking beside the stretcher. "And I want a crash cart on standby." Inside the hangar, the air was thick with tension. Surgeons, anesthesiologists, and military doctors stood ready, but uncertain. They were trained for trauma, gunshots, blast injuries, not this. Malene studied the monitors again. The numbers were deteriorating fast. "He's still reacting," she said. "Whatever he was exposed to is continuing to trigger his system." A senior surgeon cleared his throat. "With respect, Nurse Jenkins, protocol says we wait for toxicology confirmation." Malene didn't slow down. "Protocol already failed," she replied. "If we wait, he dies." Silence followed. Then the colonel spoke. Do what she says. Malene pulled on gloves. Her movements were precise, practiced. Prepare a surgical airway, she ordered. And I want 4 epinephrine ready in microdoses, not boluses. One of the doctors hesitated. That dosage isn't in the manual. No, Malene said calmly. But it's in the body. She worked quickly, relieving pressure, stabilizing the airway, guiding oxygen where it was needed most. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her hands never shook. Minutes stretched endlessly. Then, slowly, the monitor changed. Oxygen saturation climbed. Heart rhythm steadied. A collective B. A collective breath was released across the hangar. He's stabilizing, someone whispered. Malene didn't relax. Not yet, she said. This isn't over. 2 hours later, the patient lay sedated, alive, and no longer in immediate danger. Malene stepped back, peeling off her gloves. Her shoulders finally sagged under the weight of exhaustion. The colonel approached again. You just saved the most protected man in this country, he said. She frowned. I was told he was a general. He nodded. That's true. Then he leaned closer. He's also the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The words landed heavy. Before she could respond, the hangar doors opened once more. This time, everyone stood straighter. A group of officials entered, Secret Service first, then men in dark suits. At the center of them all walked the President of the United States. Malene froze. The President stopped in front of her. I'm told you broke rules today, he said. Her stomach tightened. And in doing so, he continued, you saved a life that keeps millions safe. He extended his hand. Thank you, Nurse Jenkins. Malene took it, still stunned. Outside, cameras began to gather. Inside, a quiet truth settled in. The job she lost that morning had just been replaced by something far bigger. By morning, the story was everywhere. News alerts lit up phones across the country. A nurse fired for breaking protocol. A secret military extraction. A life saved at the highest level of government. And at the center of it all, Malene Jenkins, outside St. Jude's Memorial Hospital, camera crews packed the sidewalk. Reporters shouted questions into the air, fighting for position as satellite vans idled with engines running. Inside the hospital, panic spread faster than the headlines. The executive board assembled in the main conference room. Coffee went untouched. Screens showed live coverage, helicopter footage, blurred images of the base, her name scrolling in bold letters. This can't be happening, Linda Holloway muttered, wringing her hands. We followed policy. Dr. Marcus Sterling said nothing. His jaw was tight, eyes fixed on the screen. A legal advisor broke the silence. The nurse acted independently. If she's being praised, that puts our termination decision under scrutiny. Before anyone could respond, the doors opened. Security stepped aside. The president walked in. The room went dead quiet. Everyone stood. He didn't sit. I'll be brief, he said calmly. Yesterday, a nurse from this hospital made a decision that saved a life critical to national security. His gaze moved across the table, stopping on Sterling. She was dismissed for that decision. Sterling swallowed. Sir, she violated chain of command. The president nodded once. Chain of command exists to serve people, not to replace judgment. He turned to Linda. Your policies removed a professional for doing exactly what she was trained to do. Linda's voice shook. We were protecting the hospital. You protected procedure, the president replied. She protected a human being. Silence pressed down hard. I expect a full public retraction, he continued. Immediate reinstatement. And a formal apology. No one argued. They couldn't. Across town, Malene sat in a quiet room at the base, watching the coverage in disbelief. She still wore the same clothes from the night before. A knock sounded. A communications officer entered. "You'll be returning to St. Jude's today." She stiffened. "I don't want my job back," she said softly. The officer hesitated. "That's not what's being offered." He handed her a folder. Inside was a federal appointment. A newly created role advising emergency response protocols across civilian and military hospitals. Malene closed the folder slowly. "For years," the officer said, "people like you were told to stay in your lane." He met her eyes. That lane just changed. By afternoon, the hospital steps were overflow. Malene stepped forward, blinking against the lights. "I didn't break rules to be brave," she said into the microphones. "I broke them because a child, and then a man, needed help." She paused. Medicine isn't about permission. It's about responsibility. Behind her, hospital leadership stood silent. Dr. Sterling didn't look up. The crowd erupted. 1 year later, the emergency wing at St. Jude's Memorial Hospital looked different. New leadership. New protocols. New training walls lined with names, not of donors, but of nurses and first responders who had acted decisively under pressure. At the center of it all was a small plaque. "Clinical judgment saves lives." Malene Jenkins walked the hallway in a clean white coat, her ID badge clipped neatly to her chest once again, but the title beneath her name was new. Director of Emergency Response Integration. She wasn't there to follow rules blindly anymore. She was there to teach when rules must bend. In a conference room, a group of residents and nurses listened as she spoke. "You will be told to wait," Malene said calmly. "You will be told to ask permission." She paused, letting the words settle. "But when someone is dying in front of you, your training matters more than your title." No one spoke. They didn't need to. Across the city, another building carried the weight of consequence. Dr. Marcus Sterling sat alone in a sparsely furnished office, a cardboard box at his feet. His medical license had been suspended pending review. Civil hearings waited ahead. No cameras this time. No applause. Just silence, just silence. That evening, Malene stood outside the pediatric wing. Through the glass, she saw Leo, laughing, alive, chasing a balloon down the hallway. His mother spotted Malene and rushed over, tears in her eyes. "You saved my son," she whispered. Malene knelt, smiling gently. "You saved him too. You trusted someone to act." Leo waved. She waved back. As night fell, Malene walked out.